Morning, everyone. Welcome to the audit risk meeting.
Turn your mic on. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the audit risk meeting, a meeting for Thursday, 8th of June. We do have an apology from Councillor Lara Blackmore and also Councillor Colin McFadden. I think that's it. If we can note them, do we need a resolution to receive those? Could somebody move that, please? Grant and John.
Mr. Chair, can I also have it noted that Councillor Blackmore is away on council business?
Yep, thank you. We'll put that motion then. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 3 is confirmation of minutes. There is a resolution, a recommendation there on page 3. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Short.
That the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on 9 March be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield, put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? It's quite good to. It's quite useful today. I only need to look on this side. No declarations. In that case, are our presenters online? Oh yes, welcome. We'll move on to item 5, presentations, and the first one is from Aon New Zealand, and I'd welcome our presenters Deanna McDonald and Matthew Wilson, and I believe are you both there?
Yes, we are. Thank
Very
you.
Good. Well, I'll hand over to you. Looking forward to your presentation. I'm not sure how much time we've got allowed, but how much time do you think you need? And perhaps we could just ensure we have a bit of time for questions to build into that. I'm sure councillors will have something to ask you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm Deanna McDonald, and with me is Matthew Wilson. We are part of the Aon Local Government Risk Practice Group, which we are your broker. So I'll just share my screen and then we can go and through a presentation for you. In a moment.
Please sing out if there's any questions along the way. This isn't death by PowerPoint.
Good.
Okay, so we've been asked to go through the current market and where it's sitting. Now, we are currently in a phase where we've got the market we'll look at it in 2 ways. Initially, as it was prior to the 27th of January, which was the Auckland, Northland, Coromandel floods, and then obviously consequently Cyclone Gabriel. And so we'll focus initially on what had happened previously. Now, in this schematic we've got in front of you is what the market in the APAC region, where we play predominantly, was looking like in Q1. Now, looking at what's there at present, there's a little bit of green going through, meaning it's starting to stabilise a wee bit in those areas. However, if we looked at this market, same screenshot from the year previously, it would have been no green whatsoever and a lot more red. So we have started to see at that stage the market looking a lot more stable. We have been in what's considered a hard market for about the past 5 to 6 years, and where the increases have been going through year on year. That has come down predominantly through to what is considered secondary nat cat events. Now, these are weather events that are happening more often. Now, whether or not you believe in climate change, the weather events have been happening more often and have been having a greater impact on the insurance market. We had the likes of Hurricane Ian in October last year, which was one of the most costliest events on the insurance market. Closer to home, earlier last year, we had the Australian floods in New South Wales and Queensland, and they were about $6.7 billion dollars on the insurance market. Obviously, we'll talk about the events of the flooding and those weather events that have hit closer to home since then, a bit later on, but there is a frequency of these events. Now, looking at what affects an insurance program, it is the number of these events that are hitting more frequently in the lower end of the spectrum. So if you have the value of an insurance program or the cost of a claim versus the number of events, it's the number of events that are in that lower end of value that are going through and hitting more frequently on an insurance program. And that is what those attritional losses, and they will kill an insurance program. Whereas when you have the higher costly events, one-off, the likes of an earthquake, that still obviously go through and do happen, but they're the ones that the programs are generally designed for. So what we're looking at is making a concerted effort to see where your program is fitting into this, where your deductible levels are sitting and how you are placed within that market so that you are focusing in the right area for your program. Just closer to home, we're looking at what's been happening around here with the costs of events again. Obviously, we've got those Australian floods. We still have the likes of the volcano in Tonga. We had the earthquake in Papua New Guinea, but majority of those events have been weather events that are ticking away at those programs. Now, because of these, up until last year, we were having, on the 1st of January, the reinsurance treaties. So the insurance markets reinsure, and those reinsurance markets reinsure. And they go through their treaties on the 1st of January, and they were expecting them to be challenging, and they were, but we've still got our local market reinsurance treaties to go through on the 30th of June. So we'll have a look and see how those are going to be played out, knowing that we have had these closer to home large local events, which will be an interesting time to say the least. Let's move on to the next one. So I'll hand over to Matthew and he'll go into a bit of more explanation around what's happened post those weather events in January and February.
Okay, so as Dee said, the big focus that was on the global markets, so these secondary natural catastrophe events, which are the weather-related events. And obviously we've had the 27th of January losses in and around Auckland, Northland, Coromandel, and then we've had Cyclone Gabriel come through. Just to put some context around those, and these numbers will change because certainly for Cyclone Gabriel, we are still in the relatively early stages of understanding the full costs. But we're just painting a bit of a picture here as to what we're talking about. So as you can see there, significant damage, significant volume of claims. And as Dee said, the reinsurance treaties for a lot of the local markets are coming up 30 June. So that is going to have an impact on those reinsurance prices for the local markets. We probably think that the two events will end up somewhere around about the $3 billion number in terms of insured losses. So these are significant events, and you've all seen the pictures and the impacts of these. Sorry, let me just go to the next slide. So we've got a bit of a double whammy going on. your premiums are basically calculated by applying a rate percent to the values. If we talk about your infrastructure insurance or your material damage insurance, so these comments are largely around the property market. We've got the expected increases that we're going to see because of the claims. And then we've also got the double whammy is we're in some quite unique times globally in terms of inflationary pressures. And you'll have all seen this, you know, at a domestic level, cost of food, cost of services, geopolitical issues that are going on at the moment. So values are increasing. And this slide here gives an indication as to what those values are doing to claims settlements. And the insurers refer to this as claims inflation. And you can see there that the United States is leading, but New Zealand's not far behind. We are experiencing some very unique inflationary pressures at the moment. And why that is relevant from the insurer's point of view is, just for an example, if you insure a building for $20 million today, what is that going to cost in a year's time if it burns down or you lose it at the end of the policy period? So that 20 million might be 25 million, might be, you know, an increased number. Therefore, the insurers are also having to factor some of that in to their premium calculations. Are there any questions on any of this so far?
There is one, Councillor Headfield.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just going back to that last slide on terms of the Gabriel and 27 Jan, the 890 million in claims and the 2.47 billion in damages. Where does the gap lie in that? Is that sort of government infrastructure and council infrastructure, or are you expecting that 890 million to increase significantly?
I think the 890 million will increase reasonably, it's an oxymoron, reasonably significantly. There is certainly an element of that total damage that is uninsured. For example, land isn't insured, so there may be costs relating to stabilisation of land. I've got a place up in the Coromandel, and you may or may not be familiar, but the road that goes across the bottom of the Coromandel Peninsula, State Highway 25, has been completely wiped out, and they're now looking at building a new bridge. Huge, great landslip happened. That is an uninsured cost. We don't insure roads. So there are some numbers in there, but it is a moving feast at the moment because we are still going through understanding the total cost. In round numbers, for example, we have claims going through for some of the Hawke's Bay councils that were impacted. And in round numbers, because I don't want to go into too much detail, you know, you're talking of $100 million plus loss there alone, which is still being quantified as they go through the process.
These figures that are put on the screen here, they're not just for council or government. These are including homeowners, so for your personal insurance as well. So this is right across the spectrum from mum and dad through to councils and central government. So it is a huge number that has been affected. Okay, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so what does all of this mean? And you knew there was going to be something coming.
It's pretty obvious.
Yes, that's right. I feel like the harbinger of doom sometimes when we do this. It's not all bad news, but we are wanting to highlight to council what we're expecting the markets to do. So there is a degree of uncertainty at the moment because, as the previous question has highlighted, we don't actually know yet completely where some of these numbers are going to end up, and that will take time. We are expecting the market for property has indicated initial estimates going to be between 15 to 20% increase on rate. Now, I emphasize the rate, excuse me, I emphasize the rate component because if your values go up by 20% and the rate goes up by 15%, you are in essence going to see a 35% increase in premium, because it is derived from those total declared values. Now, we are also, Deanna mentioned about Hurricane Ian. Your infrastructure insurance, this is your Three Waters assets, and we're not ignoring the Three Waters reform, but what we are doing at the moment is operating as though it's the status quo until anybody can turn around and tell us definitively what is going to happen. It's recently obviously been delayed until 2026. There's the small matter of a general election coming up as well. So we're just working on that. We've got to keep carrying on as we are. That program is placed in the London markets. That's the historical reasons for that. We have a very good relationship with those markets because we go and see them. We have face-to-face conversations with them. We present to them with council representatives, and they know who we are, which is a good thing. If you are one of the American entities who currently is potentially struggling to get some capacity out of the US markets because they've been hammered by a number of these weather events, most notably Hurricane Ian, and you start going to negotiate or interact with other offshore markets, you're going to be what we euphemistically term in the industry as a distressed purchaser. And what that means is it's going to cost you more money. You are not a distressed purchaser because we have those ongoing relationships with the markets. They know who you are, they know who we are. So we are reasonably confident that there will be sufficient capacity within the markets, i.e. we'll be able to buy the amount of insurance we need. There is going to be some increasing in rates. It does require us to differentiate you from all the other entities that are going into those markets. And as I say, we have those long-standing relationships. And this is one of the reasons why we're starting this whole renewal process early. Your program runs from 1 November to 1 November. Much to your team's distress, probably, we have asked for the information to come back to us by early July, which means we can then have a good look at the information, the quality of the data, and then we will be able to look at options, because there are going to be some options for you. And as Dee alluded to earlier on, whether that means we have to look at increasing deductible levels or be more selective on the assets that are insured. We are acutely aware, in one way or another, Aon Act for 70 local authorities. We are acutely aware of affordability issues around this. We can't just keep seeing premiums going up by 20, 30% year on year. It does have an impact on rate setting, LTPs, et cetera, et cetera. So we are looking at options that we can mitigate the impacts of the market. Ultimately, the market is going to be what the market is going to be. It's how we interact with that market and some of those decisions around insurance programs. This is a little vague at the moment, and I'm aware of that, but that's because we are starting the process now, and we're having internal meetings and conversations about what we can and can't do so that we can come back and report to you as early as possible so that any decisions that need to be made can be made. So this is just sort of painting the picture. One last comment I will make is in the liability space. So we are starting to potentially see third parties holding council responsible for the damage that they have suffered as a result of these weather events. Unfortunately, councils are always seen as having a bottomless pit of money and invariably the last man standing. Now, we don't believe that those actions will get very far because you can't really be held responsible for a natural event, but we are seeing people trying it. So again, we are going to be watching that very closely. Is there any questions on that?
Sweet.
One.
Thank
Yep.
you. I just
Lynn.
have one question. Normally we have a rating A or AA or B or whatever as New Zealand on the international market. What are we looking like at the moment?
I don't know is the short answer. I'd have to find out and get back to you. If we put this into a global perspective, yes, we've had some significant losses, but certainly I'm probably not going to be able to answer your question directly. What I can say is from the insurance market, if we take the London markets and the infrastructure insurance, the way the programs are structured is it's not just one insurer who is taking the lion's share of the risk. There are, I think off the top of my head, 15 or 20 different markets on the infrastructure placement. So I mentioned earlier on that we got a claim for the Hawke's Bay, circa $100 million. Not one insurance company is going to be writing out a check for much more than about $15 million in round numbers. And then when you convert that all the way back into either US dollars or pound sterling, in the grand scheme of things, they are not huge claims for each individual market. It is a big claim overall, but because we deliberately have a strategy whereby there are lots of insurers involved in the program, so we spread that risk, it's not too impactful on any one market. But as Dee alluded to, the insurers are seeing an increase in frequency of these weather events globally, which is why they are looking at doing rating adjustments, because they're sort of trying to future-proof these programs. I don't think we're going to be seen as being too bad, but we need to demonstrate that we are taking this stuff seriously, which is why part of the presentations that we do to the London markets is what are councils doing? And this isn't a you specific comment, this is a generic council comment. What are councils doing around resilience of assets? How are they improving assets? If we know these events are going to come through more frequently, is there something you can do around the asset management that makes them more resilient? But I can't answer your specific question, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's a good point. The insurance obviously is only one part of the risk management process. We need to be mindful of that. And with premiums increasing dramatically as they have shown per your graph over the last nearly 10 years now, they're getting cost of insurance is getting fairly expensive. So, Councillor Short.
Thank you. You're talking about resilience. Well, in places like the Hawke's Bay, obviously one of the best things they can do to make themselves more resilient is upgrade the infrastructure that they already had. But then how do you fund the difference? Because if you need a higher and longer and stronger bridge, and if you're only insured for direct replacement, then, you know, it comes back to the ratepayer or the taxpayer, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This is a slightly flippant comment, and please don't take it in any other way than that. You can probably tell from the accent. I've been living in New Zealand for 20 years, and when I go back home, friends say to me, "What's the best thing about New Zealand?" And you rattle off a number of things, but one of them is that there's, and I don't know what the current population is, there's 4.5 million people live here. And then people also say to me, "What's the worst thing about New Zealand?" There's 4.5 million people live here. We have a funding base for all of these things that the argument becomes with this, is it taxpayer or ratepayer? There is a limited pot of money that we can get access to get these things done. And it's just really difficult because you're quite right. I'm speaking entirely personally here. This isn't a company statement. What does the Hawke's Bay do? They've had this big event come through. The regional council's been absolutely hammered in terms of the river management asset stuff. Do they now have to go off and build stop banks that are 2 meters higher or whatever? And where does the funding come from that? it is difficult. There's no question about it. But there are things that can be done in terms of asset management. There are potentially some solutions, changing building processes, designs, which the insurance market will want to see. The insurers don't want to be seen as the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. So we will be asking questions about what is happening in terms of that resilience piece.
We have spoken to your team already about this so that we can get a good picture of where your resilience is being built into your network, whether it be changing your ferrous cementous pipes into HDPE type pipes for that whole earthquake prone areas. So they've got some stories that we can put into the presentation to go to the markets to show that you are being a prudent asset owner. You're looking at future-proofing your assets and your network. So there's things that are being done in the background so that we can help in with getting the right rates coming back for you at renewal.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I think it's fair to say we do appreciate your work with us in that area, not just being a simple insurer, but looking at the whole risk management picture. And yeah, that's very important. And we appreciate your expertise in that area and the work you do. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions? No, well, if not, look, I'd like to thank you for your presentation today. It's been quite insightful to hear about the global big picture that you've presented and what effects they might have on us as they flow down to us here in the Manawatu. Quite clearly, we're looking at some reasonable premium hikes this year, and the points that we've talked about around other alternatives and overall risk management, I think is pretty important. So thank you for that, and thank you for presenting to us so early in the stage. It's an indication that you are working with us very closely, so we do appreciate that again. With the premiums not with the policy renewal due 1st of November, is that right? Is that what you said? Right. Yeah, we're at early stages and obviously working closely together to get things right. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Right, thank you. Right, well, in that case, we'll move on to item 5.2, safety and wellbeing deep dive presentation. And here you are.
Was.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing us all this morning. Obviously, I've got Warwick and Kirsty and Francis, so Warwick's the library manager, who you obviously all met as part of the deep dive, and probably have all met before as well in the library, and as well as Kirsty, our HSR. So today we're just going to talk over your due diligence requirements as part of being elected members, talk about the site visit that we went to at the current library, and just an overview of, again, of the nature of operations that the library has, and the worker representation, obviously Kirsty, and the key risks for the library. So first up, your due diligence obligations. So as an elected member, you are required to acquire and update knowledge of health and safety matters, gain understanding of operations like carried out at the library, and the risks and hazards associated to all of those operations. You need to ensure that council has and uses the appropriate resources and processes to eliminate or minimise the risks, and ensure council has appropriate processes for receiving and considering information about incidents that may occur and the hazards and risks responding to the information in a timely way. We also need to ensure that there are processes for complying with any duty and that these are implemented, and verify that these resources and processes are in place and being used. So thank you to those that came to visit our current library. Much smaller space than previously had, but definitely a temporary space. And everyone, I know everyone's looking forward to the new space that will be coming soon. And you would have heard obviously from Warwick and Kirsty about all of the different things that happen at the library, not just about the books, lots of programs and different activities that the library now caters for. As I've said before, the HSR for the library is Kirsty. So Kirsty is part of the Safety and Wellbeing Committee and comes along to the meetings and is the library's representative. So if anyone has any concerns or anything they'd like raised, she brings those ideas and thoughts or queries to the committee for discussion. And also a good way for her also to receive information and then give that back to the library team as well. So when we're sort of at the library, talked about the different risks involved at the library across all the different activities, operations that they do at the library. This is just a bit of a reminder about the different, how sort of risks are identified and then minimised as well, and how they're controlled. So these are the main 5 risks for the library. There are others as well, but these are the sort of top 5 that have been identified. So we've got manual handling, falling objects, injury from equipment, difficult customers, and working late and off-site. So just going through the first one, there's the manual handling. It's a sort of low to moderate risk. There's potential causes for things to go wrong. Then when you've got your current controls, and also the actions underway or that things that have been given consideration. Obviously, the new redeveloped library, the layout has been designed to reduce risks. It's going to be sort of purpose-built, designed for the library. So a lot of the sort of current risks are going to be further reduced with the new layout. Again, the same with falling objects. The library's going to have, the most up-to-date shelving, which, again, further reduce risks of shelving collapsing or things falling off shelving, that type of thing. And then we've got injury from equipment. So this is the makerspace type operations. So the new redeveloped library is going to have a purpose-built makerspace area, which includes ventilation with filters, proper lighting and secure access, that type of thing. So it's very exciting. So the main sort of risks that the library sees is the difficult customers, which we did talk about during the site visit. And again, we currently have a whole lot of different controls in place to manage the risks. But again, the new redeveloped library, there's been a lot of consideration around the design of it and extra sort of security features to also help ensure the staff are feeling safe, and there's areas to go that that will be swipe access only. So if they need to retreat for a particular reason, they can do.
We asking questions on
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Just on that difficult people, how often do you get situations where you need to trespass people for their behaviour? Or the other one is, are there people who the Police and Justice Department recommend don't come to the library, and are you notified? How would you know if someone that was on their register came into the library or tried to come into the library?
So number one, how often? I'm struggling to recall when we last trespassed someone. It's perhaps at least a year or so ago. So not terribly often. We seem to go through spates. So a few years back, we did have a number of people which we did have to. We had a particular relatively young person. I think he was only about 12 or 13, who was very problematic for a while. We do keep it as a last resort unless someone's behaviour is really beyond the pale or they're highly violent or something. We try and manage it without. So it's not a very frequent occurrence. It's one of the tools that we use, but because we're a space for all, we try not to. A good example is we had someone 2-3 months ago sort of go off on a Saturday morning, and we've been able to, we seriously considered trespassing the person, but we talked to the floor team and they were happy to give the person another chance, and that has so far worked well. It helps that we had a council member of staff who's a former police officer and had a chat to the person. I think possibly had a history there as well and had some better approaches. We're being more proactive and engaging with that particular individual, which makes them a lot calmer and feel a lot more welcome. And so far their behaviour's been absolutely fine. And basically they went off not, I assume, due to issues that they have within themselves rather than...
Oh, it wasn't to do with...
No, it wasn't to do with us.
Library as such.
I'm being very careful what I say just to preserve their privacy and so on. Sorry, the second part of your question?
That does happen. The Justice, we've had that probably twice where the police have come in and said, does this person come into the library? They often have photos. They don't tell us anything, but they often warn us to be careful around him, or to, on this particular case, to ensure he wasn't in the children's area. And yeah, so there was, it hasn't happened for a little while though, has it, Warwick?
No.
Yeah, so it probably happened twice, 3 times maybe.
And the last one is working late and off-site. So there's different controls that are in place to ensure that staff are safe. And again, the Breed Branch Library will also have a range of high-spec safety features to help the staff feel safe, and obviously as part of that open library policy as well. And the next 2 slides around the strategic activity plan and the update. We have delayed the strategy due to our survey not going out yet. So the survey will be going out end of this month. And that's just to ensure that the strategy that's in sort of draft form at the moment has captured all of the direction that we need to go from the feedback from the staff. Does anyone have any questions? I won't go through all of the strategic activity plan, but that's just where we're currently at.
Cool. Thank you for that. Very good. Any questions?
Can I just make an observation? Sorry, I missed the visit, but one thing I do at the library is the JP clinic there. And just as an observation, I think the team at the library are doing a pretty incredible job actually working with the constraints that you're currently working on. I have to observe that the morale of the team there does appear to me to be uniformly high, and that's that's really quite a compliment, I think.
Thank you.
So no doubt when you go into the new redeveloped library,
very exciting.
People are going to be absolutely thirsty. I think there's a really good job being done there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No, very good. Well done. Your Worship.
Thank you. I just want to endorse those comments on behalf of Council. Thank you for the work that you and your team do, if you could pass that on to them. And we do understand and appreciate the circumstances, you know, the challenging, to say the least, across a whole lot of areas. And I agree, the morale and, you know, bright and bubbly and when they're dealing with customers. And yeah, so we just thank you for what you're doing. And I can hear the enthusiasm when we open the doors for the new one, and it'll be well deserved for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Howard. We'll pass it on to the team.
Yeah, it's not easy when it's you're in a slightly disruptive environment, being moved out of your normal place of work, but yeah, you seem to be handling it very well. So yeah, well done. All good. So yep, I'd agree with all that. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
Right, we'll move on. Item 6 is notification of late items. I'm not aware of any. Item 7, officer reports. The committee work plan update. Francis, I think it's basic for information. Couple of tweaks there to the work plan on page 10. Just to grab the alterations. Alterations, I think, noted in green. Is that right? With just a degree of timing adjustments from June till September on a couple of items.
Yes, that's right. This is just for completeness, so that the committee is aware basically what you've signed up to do over the next little while.
All good. Everybody happy with that work plan? Any questions? All good. We'll just receive that then.
So we do have a recommendation on page 10.
Yeah, would someone like to move that, please? Councillor Short.
Did the committee work plan update be received?
Thank you. Your Worship, it will be the seconder. I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks. Item 7.2, internal controls update. Francis.
Yes, this is our standard report on the key internal controls, and pleasingly there is nothing to report.
Very good. No, 4 overdue policies, but they're in hand by the look of it, and seem to be on top of things. Any questions?
Just
Councillor Short.
Just the hall management policy. I know the other 3 that in the overdue ones, I sort of know where they're at, but have we talked about the hall management policy in recent time?
I can respond to that. I'm not allowed to go home tomorrow until I've finished it. I was told this morning.
Oh, good. All right, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Hatfield.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just on the code of conduct, I'm just actually wondering how extensive the review of the code of conduct is going to be, and when we actually might see that. Sort of the document actually looks pretty good to me, but there you go.
Sorry, I'm not sure if Her Worship wants to comment on this. My understanding is it's sitting with the Chief Executive and Her Worship before it comes back to Council.
Thank you. We have had an initial discussion around it, and I agree that there's nothing in there that we would significantly want to have a look at reviewing and changing. So I will follow up with that because we need to get it back to Council for adoption.
Yep. Yeah, Francis.
Sorry, it's just worth noting that in the meantime, the previous code of conduct is still in existence. It governs until we update it.
I tend to agree with Councillor Hadfield that
that would actually be the current code of conduct, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems to be working well, and
yes,
fortunately we haven't had to call
yes.
on it, using it as far as I'm aware in recent times. So all good. Right, any other questions? No, if we just received that report as well. A similar recommendation. If someone would like to move that. Well, I'll move that the committee receives the internal controls update. Somebody second that. Councillor Hadfield. I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, item, we're up to 7.4, quarterly performance report.
7.3.
Oh, 7.3, sorry. Safety and Wellbeing quarterly report.
Yes, which I think Amy was intending to stay for, but she might have been so excited by how well the library thing went that she's so I'll present it, and then if there are any technical questions, I'll pass those over to Amy. Of note, not on this report, but has happened since this report, is a notifiable incident to a staff member. So that was in the operations team, reticulation team, where one of our staff member has lost the end of his finger. So WorkSafe, we reported it to WorkSafe within a couple of hours of it happening, and WorkSafe within about an hour came back and said that they were happy to close the case, but we are continuing our investigation, Amy, with Hamish's team to make sure that we put processes in place so that that doesn't happen again.
All good. Questions, comments? No, thank you for that report then. You're disappointed to hear about a notifiable incident, but these things happen from time to time, unfortunately. Someone would like to remove the recommendation on page 16. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, happy to move that the council's significance, that the Audit and Risk Committee receive the Safety and Wellbeing report for Q3 of the 22-23 year.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Short. I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, now 7.4, quarterly performance report.
Two microphones. Ah, surround sound. Exciting. Highlight of my day. All right. I was thinking that this would be a new report for some councillors or only the second time, but actually you guys have all been here quite a bit, so there's no newbies, which is different. Okay, so the quarterly report, it's looking pretty positive. So we've got a surplus of 2.7 against a budgeted surplus of 3.4. We're talking about revised budget here, not the annual plan budget, so including all your carry forwards and that kind of thing. So you think, well, that's pretty close in the big numbers that we have, but it's a combination of some quite large swings and roundabouts. So if you just look at the high level, you think that looks okay. The devil's in the detail in this instance. Not surprisingly, we've got higher grants and subsidies. I mean, we've been getting money to do a lot of capital works, and you can see those flowing in, which is really good. Development contributions are lower than we were expecting at this point. They come in peaks and troughs, and that's really based around our subdivision applications, and they've petered off a little bit, so they're coming in a bit slower. We've got a positive in the financial revenue, so the interest we're receiving on our term deposits is better than we're expecting, but offset by the fact that our borrowing costs are more than we're expecting. So, you know, it's a tiny yay, but the other opposite side of it is that our interest costs and expenditure side is $1 million unfavourable. And we talked about that as part of next year's annual plan process and brought that in for next year's annual plan. Depreciation, no surprises there. The asset revals came in much higher than we expected, so therefore the depreciation for this current year is higher. We discussed that for the annual plan process as well. Capital spend, there's some good bits and some bad bits in here. Spend to date is 21 mil against a budget of 53, but there is another nearly $14 million contracted or committed. So, you know, in the process, got the contractors signed on the line and in progress. So if you take what we've spent plus what we've got committed, we're at 83% of our revised budget for year end, which is about where we've been for the last year or so, which is good. If we were to get to that point, when we do our annual report, it will actually show that we've overspent, because our annual report budget is much lower than our revised budget, because it doesn't reflect your carry forwards. So when we do our year-end quarterly report to 30th of June in this format to council, we might be saying 83% complete, but when we bring the annual plan, we could quite possibly be saying 110 or 120% complete. So just kind of keep that in your head. But I'll remind you of it when we get there as well. Okay, so I was going to skim through the large financial statements, but I did want to just mention under the key indicators, which are the racing dials, I'm told that they mean. Under external debt, we haven't at this point in March drawn any debt for this year, but in the last couple of months we have now drawn it. We draw it towards the end of the year because that's when the work's really being done and completed. And I'm expecting by the end of June to have drawn around 9 mil. We will have repaid around 3.5 due to our general repayment schedules. And we've also got about another 1.2 to 1.4 mil that we're repaying due to land sales. So as you'll recall, our budget assumes that surplus land that we had to sell is used to repay debt, and that's being done as well. Is there any questions on the key indicators? It's kind of a high level report. You'll see the KPIs, so the key performance indicators on that key indicator. You'll see there's 5 non-compliant items in regulatory, 1 in water supply. The thing that I'd also just put a warning out there is where it says it's yellow, a lot of those are measures that can't be measured till year end. So they could be red or they could be green. It's that kind of measure. Flicking through to the activity statements, which is the, I struggle to read because my eyes are like, wow, they're tiny. We've got some big, ups and downs across the organisation in here. The library's looking really positive, which is the first one that we come to, and that's because we've received some of the funding for the library. And by year end, I'd expect most of the funding to have been drawn down from the DIA, I think it is, from the waters funding. Halls are pretty much on track with a variance of 22,000, so that's pretty minor. Your Makina was our little bit of a issue there. We've had some issues around, we've got a combination of some staff vacancies. We've also got some issues around gas costs for gas leaks, which is a kind of an ongoing issue. Not sure if we've talked about that or not, if anyone's got any questions. I think we've talked about that previously. Yeah, so that's kind of flicking across. If you've got any questions on the page around community facilities, otherwise I'll flick to the next one.
Cemeteries are favourable. I presume that means more people died than what we expected.
Yeah, not really, thankfully. I mean, that sounds terrible. The revenue is lower than we expected, so that's, but there's also just favourable variances in maintenance. The budgets there are so small, it doesn't take much for them to be favourable, unfavourable. Yeah. Flicking over to regulatory. Yeah, where we're looking, I'm just trying to, my screen is quite small, so there we go. Animal control is favourable. Revenues coming in for this year was slightly better than we were expected. Building consents is our biggest variance in there. We've got favourable revenue due to higher inspections, and there's also lower expenditure due to shortages in the building team and consenting. I'm going to flick past in case anyone, just slow us up if you want to have a look at anything there further. Mm-hmm. Flicking across to infrastructure, the big numbers, like really big numbers. This is where predominantly our funding from Three Waters has come through. We've also got funding in here from Ohakia for some capital works. So there's some pretty big swings and roundabouts in here.
This is the roading work.
And also NZTA for the emergency works. Yep.
Yeah.
Are we to be reimbursed for most of that deficit, or half of that deficit?
We will be. Yeah. That's John's presented the report to council last month, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure of exact cash flows in terms of this being at the end of March compared to the end of June, but yes, we will get the bulk of that.
So we're reporting a budget variance of 4 million in roading year to date. So the question is this the money to come in from NZTA to reduce that? Or
Is it 31 March? No, I don't believe.
Yeah, so this report was 31 March, and that was while we were still negotiating with Waka Kotahi. I think a month or so later, Waka Kotahi came and said we'll be doing the emergency management funding. And so if we were to look at it, the report now, it's looking on budget, and we've got extra revenue coming in. And so, yeah, since this is very much March, and now that we're in, I think it was May, where council agreed to take the funding from Waka Kotahi and fund a little bit of the difference. So this report looks quite different.
And just to add to that, if you remember the council report that came through, there was the 73% enhanced fire rate for some of the works and the 92% for others. So there is a higher level of unexpected costs, but also a higher level of subsidy to offset that. So it's just a timing issue in terms of this report.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Just going to carry on flicking unless you want to have a chat about any of those. And then you're down to your CapEx reporting. There's lots of lines in there. So if there's anything that someone wanted to highlight or ask about, I will deflect to Lynn and Hamish. Or if you've got something to do with IT or that, I'll flick to Francis. Defer, flick. And then there is a report at the back, just reminding you, there's a report at the back that talks about what the movements are from annual plan to revised budget. So all the approvals that have either come through council, the general manager, and exec as such. So any questions on any of that report?
Yeah, can I just go back to the profit and loss page on
about the second or third page in?
Yeah.
Yep.
And just a question around the rates revenue, because we've collected 32 million. You got over on the right hand side, you got revised budget forecast for about 42, 43 million. What's the difference there?
So the revised budget between revised and the forecast.
Was that full year?
Yes, full year.
Okay, and that's year to date.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Apologies. Yeah. So about another 10 million. Or, yeah. 10 million
invoice
or so
quarterly. Invoice as we go along.
In the final instalment.
Yeah.
Yeah, quarter. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on any part of that report? It's a fairly long and full report, but
you also have the Treasury quarterly report. There's a lot of reading in there for those that are interested around the economic update for New Zealand and globally. As you know, Miles, our advisor in there, is always happy to talk economics and that. So if you want any more advice, he can have a bit of a chat to him. It's also outlining your liquidity and funding ratios, which are really important. Showing that our cost of funds has gone up. We were around the 3% this time last year, and we're now around 4.21, which is still pretty good. But you can see how it's creeping up. So as things are maturing, they're having to come on to and be refinanced. They're coming on to higher interest rates. And so 4.21 is still pretty good. Yeah. And we're compliant with all of our bands around our interest rate risks at this stage.
That rate's very good. I was talking to BNZ yesterday, and commercial rates are now heading up over 10%.
Kind of depressing.
Pretty nasty.
Compared to the 80s.
Yeah. Interesting, the term deposit rates are coming up too. We've got a couple of term deposits down. I think we're in the 5%, which is pretty cool. That's good. Not if you're borrowing at 10% though, but which we're not, so we're lucky.
Right. Okay, any other questions, comments? If not, there'll be a resolution on page 19. Yeah, someone like to move that resolution, Your Worship.
I'm happy to move that the council receive the quarterly performance report and treasury report to the 31st of March 2023.
All right, second, John. Thank you. Put that motion in. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, item 7.5, long-term plan organisational risk review.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee and a few colleagues. My report today is a presentation of the risk register for the 2024 to 34 long-term plan project as identified by the project team. This is the first presentation of what is the living register being regularly revisited and updated at project team meetings. The report focuses on those risks that have been classified as high risks for the project based on the risk matrix that's in Annex B to the report. However, the complete register is attached as Annex A for your information. In presenting this register today, we're looking for your feedback in relation to the risks that have been identified on the register, particularly any risks that you think are missing from the current register, or if you disagree with the likelihood or impact ratings that we've assigned to those. And we also invite you to comment on any of the proposed internal controls and mitigation measures identified for each risk. Your feedback today will be noted, used to amend the risk register and reported back at the next audit and risk meeting. Your feedback will also be shared with the LTP project team at our next team meeting on the 19th of June. I now direct you to paragraph 3.1 of my report that provides an overview of the risks to the long-term plan project that have been assigned a high risk rating. And the first is the impact of changing central government priorities. As we know, there are a number of central government reforms underway that could alter the assumptions that underpin the long-term plan project, the way that we approach the project and the outcomes we're seeking. The risk and uncertainty that goes with this must be accepted by Council. To minimise the impact of this uncertainty, our executive leadership team will keep the project manager informed of any changes. In addition, we'll rely on the guidance and advice of Tatura, applying the same assumptions that they recommend. The second high risk is the high number of staff changes. And there's been considerable staff turnover since the last long-term plan project. This means that we have staff with less knowledge and experience in many of the key project roles. In addressing this risk, we will again rely on the support and expertise that exists within our executive leadership team, as well as those staff that have been through this process before. We'll also be avoiding reinventing the wheel, relying on the process, templates and methodologies we used for the last long-term plan where possible and desirable. The third risk is high workloads due to current vacancies. Vacancies within the team mean that the work must be done by fewer people. In mitigating this risk, we aim to work smarter, not harder. We look at each deliverable and look for ways that we can simplify processes and reduce repetition. We're also actively recruiting to fill the current vacancies as soon as possible. The fourth risk is in regards to civil defence emergencies. As responding to civil defence emergencies is part of what councils do, and this is another risk that we must accept and work around. In the event of a civil defence emergency, we would expect some staff to be called away from the long-term plan project to work on other council priorities. In such an event, we would draw on the expertise of the wider group of council staff to fill any resourcing gaps and to ensure that key deliverables for the LTP project are still met. The fifth risk is council's relationship with iwi hapu Māori. A good relationship between council and iwi Māori is essential if we're to effectively engage with iwi Māori on LTP matters. This is both a risk and an issue for this project. Council's already committed to improving relationships with iwi and will be guided by our executive leadership team and council's principal advisor Māori as we navigate our way through this long-term plan project. And the last risk is the annual report and interim audit. If council's annual report audit occurs at the same time as the long-term plan audit, this has the potential to create resourcing conflicts and challenges. As we cannot do anything about audit's level of resourcing, we have to ensure that we meet all of our deadlines and audit-related deliverables. What we want to avoid is a reshuffle of our audit timing due to non-delivery at our end. Any delays impact on our ability to adopt the long-term plan prior to the 30th of June 2024 deadline. I'll now open this up for any discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. Yep, you've highlighted a number of key risks there. I think I think you got them right. Any questions or comments on any of those? Councillor Short, then Hadfield.
Thank you. Just with the staff vacancies, are you confident we can fill those this far into the national long-term plan process?
Yes, so we're undertaking the interviews for the strategy manager role next week. And whilst there were not an overwhelming number of applications for the role, we're really confident that we will be able to appoint somebody very suitable from that process. We do also have a number of vacancies for policy advisors. So as soon as we appoint the strategy manager role, we'll roll through into the policy advisor vacancies.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, I just, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wonder actually if we're looking at risk for the next 10-year cycle, is that actually continuity of elected members is not a bit of a risk for this council, given that in 2 and a bit years' time, we could potentially see an awful lot of experience leave the room. I just wonder if it's a risk that should be considered.
I would suggest that that's perhaps a risk in terms of delivery of the long-term plan. What we're talking about here more is the creation and adoption of the long-term plan between now and the 30th of June next year.
Just thought I'd throw it in there.
Yeah, fair enough, good point. Anything else? No, well, it appears we're willing to accept that list as true and correct. Yeah, so thank you for your work. I think we have page 56, a resolution to receive that technology. 56.
So we would suggest that recommendation 2 is not required based on the conversation that we've had today.
So we'd like to move that, sorry, your worship.
Thank you. That the Audit and Risk Committee receives the report of the General Manager, People and Corporate, titled Long-Term Plan Organisational Risk Review, and the attachment as follows. Annex A, the Risk and Issue Register for the Long-Term Plan 2024 to 34, and Annex B, the Council's Risk Matrix.
Do you want to move number 2 as well?
Francis just advised that we don't need number 2.
Sorry, I was trying to find the page, telling me that. In that case, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield, put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right. Item 7.6, Audit Plan 22-23.
Back again, surround sound. Right, so this is the audit plan that we've just received. It's very, very odd to be receiving it this late in the year when the audit's already started. Like, you wouldn't have this for any other contractor that we're paying. So this is for the current year's audit, including interim audit, and what they're going to focus on to get us to year end. As you're aware, they've only just finished the previous year's audit for 2022. I would expect to be presenting to you next year's audit plan right now, not last, the current year's audit plan. So that's my little bugbear. It's quite detailed. There's some pretty, I don't think there's any surprises in here if we go through the topics of what they are talking about covering. One of the things that I made a note of, just open up the report, is the first thing off the rank that they're going to be looking at is the building and resource consents. Now, that was an issue that we had at last year's annual report. At this time, it is still an issue. We're working with the systems guys to work out a way of getting that right. It's the data going into the system is correct, but the way that it's coming back out and being reported is our issue. So we're hoping that the IT and software guys can kind of get ahead on that. I was also brought up with the regulatory audit, I think it's Boynes or whichever audit it was. So it's been picked up by 2 of our audit systems. They always have the risk of management override of control. So they're always going to test our journals and our estimates. That's just standard in case we've suddenly decided to do something really weird. They always review our revaluation of infrastructure assets held at fair value. They always audit our the timing of our capitalizations. They always look at how much is our work in progress, and they always look at our assumptions around revals. That's all in there. They're still doing that. They also look at our impairment and assumptions, and we do have some assets that we're impairing. If you think about the wastewater centralisation project, we are building some new places and decommissioning some places. So therefore we're impairing the bits that we're decommissioning. Hamish is just like, oh my God.
Great terminology.
Yeah, we're building stuff, decommissioning stuff. So we're impairing the stuff that's going to be decommissioned. I think Armidale was one of the other places as well. They talk about Three Waters reform, which pretty much says that they don't really know what's happening either, but that we'll need to write a note and we will agree the note. We've done it for the last 2 years. There's always a note around the uncertainty and what the future will hold. So great. They're also going to be looking at the drinking water quality performance measures. That popped up, and they've been doing that for the last few years since the water issue over in the Hawke's Bay. So kind of nothing different in there. Like it's a standard audit that I can see. Yes, they also look at some of our new accounting standards. That's also normal. Nearly every year we have some change to our accounting standards. This year's difference is that we have to complete the audit and have it adopted by the 31st of October. So for the last 2 years, we've had an extended time frame to the 31st of December, initially due to COVID. They say they can meet that. I'm a skeptic, but we'll stay with that. But they say that they can meet the timeline. They've assigned the audits team. So we have 2 people that we are used to seeing, Debbie and Megan, our 2 head people, Josephine, and I can't remember the 3rd person, but just a couple of weeks ago, we had 4 on site for 2 weeks, and they worked positively with the team and there was no issues. There is an audit engagement letter. I think I've attached that the Mayor would sign to engage the audit. I haven't passed that to her to sign until you've seen this document. The thing outstanding, of course, is the big, how much are we going to have to pay? Hello. Slightly crystal ball gazing here. A little bit cheeky that they've already sent in an invoice. So that's pretty up there. So they've sent in an interim invoice for the work that they've done to date. And they've just said that when the prices are confirmed, that the next invoice will make the adjustment kind of thing. I'm like, wow, we wouldn't do that for any other supplier. But anyway, is there any questions on the reports?
Councillor Hadfield.
Given our statutory requirement to use Audit New Zealand, I wonder if it's not time for local government to lobby central government about who councils can use as external auditors. Because every time I've listened to this sort of stuff, we've heard the same sort of around the performance of Audit New Zealand or otherwise.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a difficult one because you can't just go get an auditor off the street. The Rating Act, the Local Government Act is very specific, but there are other auditors out there that do councils. From my understanding, I think it was a meeting at the Mayors and Chairs recently, and they decided to consolidate and put a letter forward to who worship might recall. I think it might be LGNZ, I'm not quite sure. So I've done the bones of that letter to send through to Shane. Very hard to write a letter on behalf of everybody without knowing their individual issues. So I've only kind of gone, this is ours and what I perceive. I don't quite know what you want to do with that now. Because what we are receiving won't necessarily be what everyone else is receiving. I suspect it probably is, but some other people might be more than happy with their stuff. I suppose there's a devil you know and the devil you don't as well.
Still maybe an issue that's worthy of discussion with our colleagues, with council.
Absolutely.
To actually determine whether or not we actually believe that an approach to local government New Zealand on behalf of us and other councils to central government is a worthy event.
Yeah, well,
there is a remit.
There is a, I thought there was a remit around pricing.
Perhaps
my understanding was a remit around pricing and the cost of audit, but whether or not that remit covers allowing external contractors other than Audit New Zealand, I'm uncertain, Your Worship.
Well, monopoly type arrangements seldom work well, do they? And that's what we've got here. You know, only one available provider.
Yeah, there is only one provider for us, but across the country there are others. But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Councillor Ford.
The remit doesn't address the being able to use other auditors. It is about, I've just read it, the LGNZ calls on central government to take action to reduce council audit fees by A, revisiting the scope and requirements of reporting and auditing on councils, and B, conducting a review on the practice of audit in councils and work on best practice guidance to streamline this process. This review should examine whether the reporting and audit requirements of councils are consistent with the level of reporting and audit that is required of other public entities. And so that has got through the audit, the remit selection process and will actually definitely be at the LGNZ AGM.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Mr. Chair, perhaps we could ask Shane to give an update ask the exec if he knows anything.
All right.
In addition.
This question for me then, the audit risk issues and areas that they've identified there, are they being proposed by Audit New Zealand or yourself, or what's the process for agreement on whether or not they are actually issues, the key issues that they should be looking at?
So this has come from Audit New Zealand, and as I understand their process for an annual report audit, it's set by Audit New Zealand. They kind of have I'm sure they've got a standard process where they say this is what we're going to look at across the, across the areas. They do have a bit in there that says if you'd like us to tell us about any additional matters you would like us to consider. So if we were going, I'd like you to look at, we can definitely go back and say, please add that in. So that's good. When it comes to audits of other things, such as the LTP, that's come from another layer above Audit New Zealand. I think it's the Officer of Auditors General that actually outlines what it is they'll focus on for those LTPs. So one would say that this will be fairly standard across different councils, with the exception of a couple of the key things that they've picked up in previous audits. Very hard to know what they've picked up when we haven't actually received previous audit report, but the building consent and resource consents they did highlight when they presented. So
okay, good. All right, any other comments or questions? Yeah, well, it just does raise the issue about this fee problem that they haven't quoted a price, and we're basically looking at an open-ended bill at this point, which is of some concern. Are we able, or are they likely to come up with a more of a fixed fee, or are they just going to bill what they think?
So no, they do come up with a fixed fee. Normally they give you a 2-year fixed fee. So what they'll do, we got a letter last week, which I thought was quite funny, to tell us that they're working on it and they're going to notify us soon. I was kind of like, we know that anyway, so that was lovely. But generally the letter comes out and it tells you what this year's will be and the next year's will be indicative. It also has a section that says plus disbursements, and to be fair, they live in Palmy, we live here, there's not much disbursements involved, so that's great. We have a bit of a saving there. In the report, I did put how much it has been previously. I think it's like 170,000. In a recent seminar that I went to, which was a finance forum for councils or for regional and territorials, Amanda Gray from the Office of Auditors General presented along with somebody else and verbally indicated that across the sector, they're expecting around a 20% fee increase, which I sat there and thought to myself, haven't performed, blah, 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 here's extra, it just didn't sit well. But you know, it's a hard one because they will have all the same costs that we have, staff salaries, they'll have all of the same overheads that we have. And the increases that we had previously have not been that big. So I can kind of see it, but it's also a large jump.
Yeah, I couldn't see any justification for 20% increase.
What they do is when they send out their fee letter, they tell you how much they incurred in costs previously and how much they didn't bill you, in essence. But, you know, you've got to take that on the chin, because we have had issues where the auditors that they've given us are kind of what we call juniors, really. And there's been a lot of training and toing and froing. So there's issues on both sides. Sometimes we don't respond quick enough, or the data we give them is not good enough. And sometimes it's the fact that the staff that we're working with aren't just trained from their end. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Councillor Heffield.
Yeah, perhaps we should point out to Audit New Zealand that it would be irresponsible of council to enter into a contract with them without knowing what it's going to cost us.
I have done that on multiple times. I've gone back and given and said that when they sent in the invoice just earlier in the week, they've said this is an interim invoice and could they have a purchase order? And I said, I've done a purchase order for the CE to sign off. Unsure if he will sign it off, as we don't have a contract and don't know how much it's going to be. And it breaches all our procurement policies. So, and they kind of went, oh, they've gone quiet. So, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, they audit this kind of stuff, you know. Have you got a signed contract? Have you done a purchase order? Have you done that? Kind of like, hello. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, good. We've got a recommendation then on page 65. Somebody like to move that? Well, oh, well, 65. Well, I'll move it. The Audit Risk Committee received the attached draft annual audit plan 22-23 from Audit New Zealand, and that Audit Risk Committee note the concerns of officers. No audit fee proposal has been received for the audit relating to the year ended 30 June 2023, and note that the audit engagement letter is required to be signed by the Mayor, and subsequently the audit plan 2023 will be finalised. Somebody second that, please.
Before we do that, the only thing with that is that if the audit engagement letter is signed, do we need to, oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Do we need to actually have a rider on that regarding the fee in terms of the quantum of it? Because as you say, I mean, we've got a procurement policy which we look as if we're prima facie breaching.
So we do budget for audit fees, and I would hedge a bet that I've said in the report that we do have a budget for it. I suspect it'll be slightly more than that, but we are able to cover that with an existing external audit budget. So it will actually be within budget, and it does fit within Shane's delegations. So, yeah.
No, I mean, I mean, they are actually our auditors. You know, sorry, I'm not being sarcastic. Well, I'm trying not to be. And the thing is, I guess, as an audit and risk committee, if we're going to say yes, it's fine for Mayor Helen to sign this letter, I think we probably need to have something that accompanies it going back that just does make that point quite firmly, and just, I mean, because ultimately it's whether Mayor Helen's prepared to actually sign the thing too.
Councillor Hatfield?
Yeah, perhaps if, Amanda, if they've given us an indication of in a 2-year block of what the fee is going to be, that we actually go back and look at whatever the fee was, whatever that they plonk it in Mayor Helen's letter, say that council agrees to pay this amount for the audit, and then let them come back to us.
That's actually something that was suggested by a CFO of a regional council up north, which was just tell them you'll pay that much and they have to live within it. They don't use Audit New Zealand. They're one of the lucky ones that have another audit provider. I don't know. There's some pros and cons. At the end of the day, it's about, we need to make sure we've got a working relationship with audit, and that, you know, so entirely at the end of the day, it is Her Worship that's signing the letter. We do have a budget for it. We may want to send something formally rather than just my conversations with them. Perhaps we want to send something a bit more formal back to them.
Well, I think, yeah, obviously our preference is to have a fee proposal prior to signing the letter. Councillor Short.
Yes, I was going to say, do we need to send it higher up in the organisation? Perhaps do we need to CC in the Minister of Local Government as well?
Well, thinking about the timing, I would expect us to get a fee indication in the next week or so, because we only got a letter last week to say they're really working on it. So I don't see any reason why we don't just not sign the letter until we get it. Yeah. They've already done the interim. Like, you know, they've already done the interim. So if you'd want to hold it, yeah, hold it.
Hold, yeah.
All right. Right, I'm looking for a seconder for the motion. Subject to those, or you can take allowance of those comments, I suppose.
Do you want to add in? Yeah, I'm happy to second it, but wondering if we should add to that subject to confirmation of the final budget.
So instead of note the letter, just note that the audit letter will not be signed until prices confirmed. So instead of note the audit letter is required to be signed, it will not be signed until.
Your suggestion?
I think that we need to be pragmatic about this, as Amanda said, and you know, perhaps not for the recommendation, but as an action that we write separately. We accept this recommendation because we don't want to cause anything for the audit not to continue. And this is no different than it has been in other years.
No, it is different.
It is different?
Yep, we get notified quite early on and upfront for 2 years of the cost.
Yeah. Right.
Oh. Yeah, this is a bit of an oddity this year.
Mm. And it is something that we raised with them last year, as did many councils, and you'd have to say it's come back worse.
Yeah, that's right. It hasn't improved. Councillor Ford?
Your Worship, just said what I was going to say. They're going to get very used to a lot of pushback from a lot of councils, so it's not going to be just us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dissatisfaction and anger out there from a lot of councils, governments.
Yeah.
John?
Maybe we could perhaps sign the letter, but subject with a notation on the letter to finalisation of the fee.
Sure.
So that we're saying, yes, the audit can proceed, but we still may wish to have a conversation about the fee at the end of the day.
Well, I think we're saying that with that.
Because actually we're stuck with the fee anyway, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
That's right, we've got to pay a fee.
Yeah.
We have negotiated fees with them in the past. The one that comes to mind is the audit of the last LGV. We had a fee, and then there was some sort of clause that says if it costs more, you end up paying a bit more. They came back and went, it costs this much. We kind of went, oh, don't know about that, and it came back. So there was some negotiation around there. It was after the fact. Yeah. So.
Your Worship.
I think it's just the principle of this. We don't do it with any other contract that we have with council and ratepayers' money.
Exactly. I agree.
And it's the auditor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the issue then is whether we include a comment to that effect in the resolution, that we would like to have a fee proposal or prior to signing the audit engagement letter or not.
What about that we just send a formal letter outlining our displeasure at the process to date and the timeliness of the fee notification? Signed by Her Worship.
I still think
the
Worship shouldn't sign the letter until we actually know what the fee is. And I suspect there's some agreement from colleagues on that.
Maybe we should finish the sentence as you suggested, Mayor Helen, will be finalised subject to an agreed
fee arrangement.
Fee arrangement.
Yeah.
Yep.
On that basis, I'm happy to second it.
Yep, I'm happy with that. Right.
That covers the fact that this is an audit of this committee.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, so that's good. We've got a motion moved and seconded. Any other comments regarding that? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, thank you. Right, no late items, so we'll move to item 9, update from Governance, Health and Safety Representative. Anything to report, Councillor Hadfield?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think Francis has covered off most things. I think the interesting thing to note is that even on a notifiable item, WorkSafe signed off on the report pretty quickly, and I think that indicates the strength of the council's policies and actions around these issues. The Safety and Wellbeing Committees decided to have participants make a presentation to the meeting every time, and Francis targeted me first up. I'm not quite sure why. I think it was random, to be fair to Francis. Anyhow, I gave a presentation to the committee whenever we held a meeting of 10 days ago or whatever on human factors and health and safety. And I think what Francis instructed me that I had to be brief, and you know that's pretty difficult. But I think we kept it in pretty good nick in about 10 minutes. And I think it's a hell of a good idea, actually. So everybody's bringing different ideas to the Safety and Wellbeing Committee, and actually, as we've always said, there's no such thing as a silly idea. So, yep, I launched into it, and we're looking forward to others contributing as well, Francis, aren't we? So, other than that, I think everything's in good nick. Committee does a good job. There's a bunch of dedicated staff that care about everybody's wellbeing, safety and wellbeing. So it's an important role for council, as we know, and I think it's all tickety-boo, to be honest. That's my view.
Very good. Any questions? No, thank you for that, Councillor Hatfield. All good. Item 10 is notification of items for risk register. We had a discussion earlier about the LTP issues identified, so they are already on the risk register. Is there anything else that any member thinks should be updated, where the register should be updated? Nope.
Probably just to note the session with PwC on the 29th of June, which is specifically around strategic risk and looking at both a kind of education piece, but also a critical review about where council is at the moment and where we're headed in this space.
Okay. All right. Item 11 is notification of items for next meeting. Is there anything not on the work plan or that any member thinks we should be including next time? No, thank you. Councillor Short. Yep.
I don't know whether we've got our roading contract coming up for renewal and there's a risk of not getting it right. I don't know how you want to frame that.
Probably the intent around that is we've obviously got the infrastructure focus group. So in terms of project scope and physical works and the like, as we've said before, NZTA have quite a high level of say in terms of what they will and won't fund. In terms of getting it right, I would defer to our procurement policy, which picks up the NZTA requirements in terms of procurement as well. So I guess if there's something outside of what the infrastructure focus group might look at in terms of project spec and the process we would go through in terms of MDC's procurement policy and NZTA requirements, certainly open to hear and address any of that. But I think with what we've got in place, we'll certainly get it right from a procedural point of view and from a funding point of view. Just depends on what else might be in that broad statement.
Expectation, I think I'm referring to.
I wondered if Councillor Short was referring to our processes versus the expectations or the perceptions of the community as to whether we get it right. And I'm sure we'll get it right within terms of our procurement policy and everything else, but you are hinting at the perceptions of the community.
I would suggest that there'll be elements of the community that we, as far as they're concerned, we will never get it right because we'll never have enough money to spend on the network outside their property.
I guess it sort of comes from, we don't want to set the bar too low either. I mean, I know everything comes at a cost, obviously, but
that is going to be, Mr. Chair, that is going to be a really key part of the conversation because NZTA have a very clear picture of what they will and will not fund. in terms of the various road categories and the volumes of traffic using those roads. And if council decide that they want to meet a community expectation to provide a higher level of service, the real crux of that is going to be how much money are we willing to spend on that, because it'll be 100% council/ratepayer funded. NZTA won't be into negotiations about anything over and above the minimum that they're going to provide. So,
Councillor Hepfield.
Yeah, and I think that information is going to be vital for the public meetings. Hamish, obviously, so the public meetings that we assured presenters the other day that would occur around the roading contract, and I think that's council's opportunity to actually lay that all out in front of people. The hairy options, here's what NZTA will pay for, and if you want this level of service, this is what it's going to cost you. I think that's the way to actually deal with it, and the public meetings are the prime, are the best way of doing that.
Okay, anything else? If not, we'll move to item 12, public excluded business. Committee to resolve, perhaps I'll resolve that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely confirmation of minutes, 9th of March, key project status report, information services audit update. Can I have a second of that? Councillor Hepfield, put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you.